So please welcome Martin Geddes, who's a senior analyst at STL.
Okay, thank you, Lee. So in my day job, I run around the world advising operators and their suppliers about future business models in telecom. And I'm a co-founder of the Telco 2.0 initiative, along with my colleagues at STL Partners. You might have come across our Telco 2.0 blog and other work. So as I'm a little bit short-sighted, and I can't actually read the clock at the back, I'll be talking to you for the next 3 hours about how to turn the dinosaurs into mammals. And some of the research that we've been doing into future business models around broadband. So it's about rethinking the phone company. But before we begin, let's look somewhere outside of the telecom industry, because the process that's occurring for the telecom industry is one that other industries, in fact, all industries go through, which is where they're very early days, immature, they're very vertically integrated. And over time, they become more modular. So airlines used to go and cater their own food, and they used to maintain their own airplanes, and they lose those functions. The financial services industry used to have, the bank used to sell the mortgage to you and keep it on its books for 20 years, whereas now you go to one place to compare mortgages, and then the broker has to go and buy it, and then another brand is the person who sold it, someone else securitizes it. There's lots of different roles in that industry now. It's a very wholesale-centric industry. And the industry that we found that had most analogy to telecom was one that also is in the business of shipping stuff around. So telecom at its heart is about shipping around ones and zeros from one place to another. It's telecom. And the industry that looked most similar in its structural changes it had undergone was actually the container shipping industry. And I'd like to just share with you a few of the things that happened when we went from the old break bulk system, which is how cargo used to be shipped around, to putting the physical goods into standardized sized packets and putting them on standardized sized ships and standardized sized lorries and trucks. So there were 5 things that occurred, and I think the last one of these gives us a very powerful clue as to where the telecom industry needs to go. The first thing that happened was that all the old pricing structures of the container shipping industry fell apart. And there used to be different rates for different types of freight, and same thing happening in telecom is that pricing by distance, by geography, by media type, by time of day, by how long you talk are all disappearing. Second thing was that certain people in the old ecosystem doubled down on the old model. So the Port of New York, for example, in the 1970s invested in lots of IT and new infrastructure to refresh the break bulk system and lost 100% of its business. And the Port of Newark, which invested in the container system, picked up all the business. Third thing was that the traffic tends to concentrate on certain places, which is ports, where people have to exchange the traffic between each other. And we're seeing the same effect occurring on the internet today, which is the Googleplexes of the world, is where all the traffic is concentrating. And there's very strong increasing returns to scale for that infrastructure. So a few people tend to dominate the exchange of traffic on this network. But the fourth thing related to that was that it was the ports that then made the money and not the shipping lines. So we're seeing that happening in the telecom industry is the assumption in the telecom boom of the late 90s was that it was the people who owned the fibers who would make the money. And it turns out that there's lots of routes between points A and point B, and it's the people who are A and B who are making the money, and particularly the places where everyone has to congregate to exchange their traffic. But it wasn't actually the ports who made the most money. And the company who now is the biggest shipping line in the world started off as a logistics company, because it's the logistics companies who had the most compelling solution. It was the people who were able to take the thing from the factory at one end, put it onto a truck, onto a train, take it to the port, put it onto a the sea container ship, and then do the reverse at the other end. And to manage that whole process, who made the most money. And it was Maersk who managed to reverse engineer themselves back into ports and shipping, who now are the biggest shipping line in the world. So the main message from this presentation is that telcos, likewise, need to learn how to do logistics. They aren't in the business of innovating in terms of applications to end users, although there are certain things that they can continue to do in that space. But the primary business they're in the future is logistics for data. I want to explain what that is and what it means. But there's a twist. And the twist is that they need to embed it in what's known as a multi-sided business model. And I'll explain in a moment what those are and how they look like. So firstly, why is the current model that the telecom industry have, why is it screwed? And since 80% of the industry is voice, and we're talking about emerging communications, I'll just focus on voice. So we did a survey of around 800 people inside the industry in the fall of last year. And I asked, how do you think telephony or voice minutes will be generated 5 and 10 years from now? Given 4 options. Dark red, traditional telephony. Pink is other forms of telephony offered by carriers with enhanced features for your IP, so like wideband audio and presence. The green is private voice applications like Skype. And the blue are all kinds of non-traditional telephony embedded into kiosks, into Xbox games, into click-to-call and elsewhere. And what people are predicting is that there'll be a big shift over the next 10 years into people making calls within the context that the call makes sense, not necessarily using traditional telephone system to make those calls.